Hello, everyone. I have a thinking story for you today. In 1989, the Holy Spirit spoke to me in church and told me I had to read the whole Bible. I spent the next year doing that. I was so shocked at what I had never heard before that I read it again and again. All of that time, a great deal of time, it took for me to complete it. I also taught Sunday school, vacation Bible school, and more. I thought I was doing pretty well in the category of deeds for the Lord. In fact, I figured I was probably doing better in that category than most people. Though I didn't flaunt it, I felt pretty good about myself. Then reality set in. It was eye-opening, and I'm praying it will set in for you too, as you ponder today's message. I doubt you've ever thought about this. Today, let's talk about time. There are 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week, 720 hours in an average 30-day month, and 8,760 hours in an average year. If we sleep 8 hours a day, and most people do not, that would erase 2,920 available hours in a year, leaving us 5,840 hours to do whatever needs to be done. That's a lot of hours. Have you ever wondered, as I have, how you use these hours? The biggest question of all is this: how many of them do you actually give to the Lord? I thought I was doing very well until I analyzed that question honestly. How many hours in a week do you give Him? Now, take the number of hours you honestly give God in a week and multiply it by 52, and you will discover how many hours you give Him in a year, after He has given you and me 5,840 hours to work with. Let's take a moment and think about the hours we give God from His perspective. He says in Exodus 34, verse 14, quote, "Do not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God," end quote. Our God is not only a jealous God, but jealous is actually one of His names. Wow. God's jealousy isn't a jealousy of us, as our jealousy is, but it's a jealousy of incredible love toward us. That love can be a tough love that demands and commands us to be loyal to Him and place Him first in our lives. Exodus chapter 20 lists the 10 commandments God gave to Moses. Number 1 says, quote, "You shall have no other gods before me," end quote. Now, that doesn't mean you may have built a golden calf in your backyard like the Israelites did. It means you may not put something, anything, into your life that takes precedence and priority over God. Such a thing is our idol. For example, on Sunday mornings, how many times have you skipped church? And why? Did you feel you have something better to do? Did you put your child's sports game ahead of church? Did you put your need for sleep ahead of church? Did you choose to stay home all snugly in your pajamas, instead of worshiping God with others in his house of worship, as he commands us to do in the book of Hebrews. Have you sat in church thinking constantly about the restaurant you're going to go to after church? Are you in church but playing church rather than worshiping and putting God first? Have you put your interests ahead of God? Have you put your friends ahead of God? These are just a few of the many things that make God jealous. You and I have not always put God first, have we? And we've proven that by comparing the hours in a day we give God to the hours in a day we give other people and other things. How will we face God one day and try to explain this? What can we do then to place God number one in our lives? First, we can remember today's story about the hours God has given us in a day, a month, and a year, and ask ourselves, what are we doing with those? Do we get excited about Jesus and the Holy Spirit? Are we reading our Bibles and growing in knowledge? Are we praying, tithing, and doing the jobs God prepared in advance for us to do? 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8 say, quote, "Have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. Godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come," end quote. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 11 says, quote, "But you, man of God, flee from all this and pursue righteousness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness," end quote. Verse 17 to 20 says, "Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. Command them to do good, to be rich in deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of life that is truly life," end quote. So, after sleep, you and I have 5,840 hours of life every year. What are we doing with those? Where do God's requirements of us fit into those hours? He is to be number one on our schedules. We are definitely number one on his. Just think how much he loves every person he calls his own. He sent his one and only Son to die for us. There is no greater love than a man who will lay down his life for his friends. Jesus did that for us, and God planned the whole thing. Take a moment this week and look at your schedule. Does God have his rightful number one place on that schedule? Or is he simply an afterthought? What are you doing on Sunday? Are you giving him the right number of hours among the 5,840 he has given you? Think honestly about that. And it might be the best thing you and I have ever done. It might even put God back as number one in our lives, as he, a jealous God, demands. Quote, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," end quote. Never forget that. See you Thursday.